All right, our speaker today is somebody who is known to us. She's been around for a while and led a sound healing here and is an author. She's written a couple of books, which are here, and so they'll be out there for you after we're done. Had a near-death experience years ago and lives from that energy of wanting to I guess what I said earlier, just walking each other home. So that's what we're doing. So it's Charmian Redwood. Come on up, Charmian.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So we're going back to 1980, which seems like dinosaur days. I was only 29, really normal person, school teacher, spending all our holidays climbing mountains, going abroad. It was so in England, so wonderful. And then I got pregnant and I was so happy because I love children. My husband was not so happy. He did not want children. He didn't want the responsibility. So I invited these children. I got pregnant with twins, not one, but two. As you'll hear in a minute, it was a good job I had two at once because there's no way I was having any more. So I went into the hospital. My waters broke early in the morning, went to the hospital, and the contractions weren't starting. So this was a very intervened birth, which now I know is not the way to go. But at the time, I knew nothing. So we went into the hospital, and just everything that could go wrong did go wrong. It was a Sunday. All the real doctors were at home. So I actually had an intern that was training doing a twin birth, which is not a good idea because this is a high-risk pregnancy. The anesthesiologist was just putting his coat on because he wanted to go home. He'd probably been there all night. And they said, no, there's one more, because I'd been told to have an epidural. So he put the needle in the spine for the epidural, and he put this little tube up my back so they could put in more anesthetic when it wore off. What nobody noticed was there was a kink in the tube. So when it came halfway through the labor, the anesthetic had worn off. And it was so bloody painful. And there was this woman, this other doctor was there for the second baby. She was going to push the second baby out. And she was standing there bored like this, tapping her feet while I was screaming my life away. And they had this drip with this Pitocin that brings on contractions. She turned it up from 3 to 15. Oh. And the midwife, the only one who was actually nice to me was this midwife, and she went over and who did this? And the woman said, well, I did. So they were all fighting each other. There was no sense of we're all here to help this lady too. Anyway, I gave up because it was just so painful, and this young doctor said, oh, we'd better use forceps. Well, I was expecting these little things like tongs that they showed us in the class. Yeah, I can deal with that, no problem. Well, he brought out these things that were this big, that were like bicycle handles, and I'm like, what? If I'd known that was coming, I would have tried a bit harder. Anyway, he put these things that Jenny's head was right up the top of the cervix, it wasn't down. So he pulled her out really quickly, and I was not anesthetized, so I was screaming. And what they didn't notice was that there were 3 tears in the birth canal. He only saw 2 of them, so he only stitched 2. So I had all this. I think, is the other microphone on? Is the other mic on? Is your mic on? There's a little bit of feedback, because I prefer this one. So, what was I saying? So he didn't stitch one of the tears. So I had all this internal bleeding, but they didn't know, they didn't see. And they kept me in hospital for a week because I was so ill, but they didn't look to see why I was so ill. So they discharged me, this horrible staff nurse, on a weekend again. The doctor who'd been there all week that was really worried about me, I heard him say to the nurse, "She's not right, is she? There's something wrong here." And the nurse said, "Yeah." So on the weekend, the staff nurse who didn't want me in her hospital, because I had 2 babies and they were putting her nurses to too much work. So she got this locum doctor, the weekend doctor, to discharge me. She didn't want well people taking up beds in her hospital. So I went home, and 2 days later, I just knew I was really ill, and the doctor needed to come. Fortunately, in England, the GPs come to your house. So it was about 7 o'clock at night, and I said to my husband, "You got to call the doctor." And he's like, no, we can't bother the doctor. Just call the doctor. So he came in, and he could smell the infected blood as soon as he walked in the room. And he actually examined me. What a novel idea. And he said, "You've got this tear, so you're going to have to go back to the hospital." And I said, "No way. They tried to kill me the first time. Definitely going to do it the next time. I'm not going back to the hospital." So he gets on the phone, calls the hospital, and he's shouting at the people, how could they let this happen? Anyway, I was rushed back to the hospital in the ambulance. And the first night that I was there, I had this experience that completely changed my life. I floated up out of the body. All of me was the one that was looking down at the body in the hospital bed. None of me, nothing of me was in the body. So that was my first lesson. The body is just the house that I live in, but it's not who I am. So then, I started to float away. There was no fear. I knew I was going into peace, and I knew there were angels there. I didn't know where I was going, but I just went. And the next minute, I'm just surrounded by this golden light. And everything that you could ever want was in the golden light. It was being wrapped up in this cocoon of unconditional love. And as soon as I got there, I knew this is home. This is where I belong. This is where I came from. This is where I want to be. So the next minute, I'm floating in all this bliss, going, "Oh, this is cool." The next minute, Jesus is floating in front of me. And I love this picture because of the eyes, because his eyes were like luminous universes. His body was white light. His heart was a blazing blue star. But his eyes just looked at me with complete forgiveness, acceptance, and love. If anyone was looking at all the things I might have possibly done wrong, it was me. He didn't care because he saw who I was. And we had this conversation in my head. And he said, "Because your heart is pure, if you want to, you can stay with us in the golden light." Yes! But we're asking you to go back, not telling me I had to go back, but asking you to go back. Because the world needs your love, your wisdom, and your healing. Well, at the time, I didn't have any of that. I was a really normal person living in this little English village, spending every night in the pub, playing darts and dominoes, and drinking really good beer. So I said, "How can I go back down there knowing that this is where I belong with you?" So he took a piece of his star and he put it into my heart. And he said, "Now you will know that I am always with you." So I don't remember the agreeing part. But the next minute, I'm back in the same hospital room, floating over that body, which is not me, knowing that if I get back into that, which is not who I am, I will take on suffering. if I stay up there, which is who I am, I will never suffer again. But I call it the divine plot, because I was really set up. The only thing that I came back to this earth for was my babies, because they were only 10 days old with a father who didn't want them. And it was a whole karmic thing that I found out later. There was no way I was leaving them with him. So I came back into the body. And when I woke up the next day, I was not the same person. There was no me. There was no my life plan, my goals, my career, the mortgage, all that kind of stuff. Everything that I'd done in my life was completely meaningless, because I knew that this is what is real, and everything down here is just a story that I'm making up, and it's not real. So first of all, I knew that there was a plan for this earth that is lifting it back into light. And I didn't know what it was at the time. I do now, I didn't know. I just said, wherever you need me to be, I will go, because I want this plan to work. So they took me very literally, and I probably moved 100 times in 40 years. And the other thing was, I said, I want a way to take people to experience what I just did, which changed my life, but without all the drama. I don't want everyone to have to go through. So I developed this way of using hypnotherapy to take people into the golden light, to actually experience all of your consciousness. It's not enough to know that you have one and you are one. You've got to actually go there and experience it. So I've been doing that for many, many years now. So when I came back in and I eventually started to get my energy back, I just started taking every class, studying astrology, healing, flower essences, circle dancing. I just wanted to get back there. So I just started investigating this whole new way of life. The husband, he was so horrible. And the twins they were 4. And they were starting to ask, why is mummy always crying? And why is daddy always shouting? And they were just 4. And I thought, what am I doing to my children? I don't want them to grow up thinking this is normal. So I put them in the car with a bag of clothes, left, and never went back. But that was when the miracles started to happen. And this is what I really want to tell you about, is that when you give your life, it is given back to you in ways you can't even imagine. So here I am with the kids, babies, they were just 4 in the car, and I was going up to my parents who lived an hour away, but I knew they wouldn't be home because it was market day and they would be shopping. So I went to a little post office near where they lived, and I asked the guy, do you know anywhere around here that I may be able to rent a cottage or rent somewhere to live? He said, well, go and knock on that door. So I went and knocked on that door, and the guy said, have you come about the advert? No. So I ended up moving the next week into this little cottage on the river, and with the twins, and they could go to school straight away in that village. So it was all just handed to me. And then when I was going to all these classes, I'd met this lovely group of people from this area of Norfolk who were all healers and musicians, old hippies, such a lovely, lovely group of people. Well, one of them had inherited an estate in North Norfolk, and the manor house had burned down, and there was this beautiful garden. So they got me a trailer, actually, that a local farmer lent us a trailer in exchange for letting his pigs eat in the garden. So we had all these pigs running around. And I lived in the trailer, but I was going through a divorce, and he was trying to convince the court that I was an unfit mother. And one of them was living in sanitary conditions. So the day before the welfare officer was coming from the court to investigate me, one of the little cottages came free on their estate. So I moved straight in and she came. So we went to court a few months later, and the judge kept trying to make the judgment, and he wanted to give me the custody. And every time he tried to make the judgment, Les's lawyer would jump up, but she's doing astrology, but she's doing meditation and leaving the children unsupervised, and she's doing circle dancing. That was all he could come up with to prove I was an unfit man. The judge said, shut up, sit down, stop wasting the court's time. And he gave me the money. He ordered the house to be sold, and he said I was to have the money. Gave me custody of the twins. And then he turned to me and I said, I'm really sorry. He said, I'm really sorry you've had to sit and listen to all this. I hope you have a wonderful life. And I had not said one word through the whole this proceeding. So that's what we did. I lived there very, very happy. And then I started traveling, because I just knew that I needed to find another way of living, and I had this urge, this spiritual need to go and experience other cultures and other places. So I started going to all these hippie camps, and ended up moving down to Glastonbury, England, which is the Sedona of England. It is the Celtic. It's the Christian. It was the first Christian church in England. It was Celtic Mecca. If you were posted to Glastonbury, you'd made it to the top of the tree. It's Avalon. It's where the Grail is anchored. So I ended up living there. And there were all these Native American teachers coming to the camps that I went to Glastonbury. And some of them were really cool, and some of them were really not. They were on big ego trips and real controllers. And anyone that showed up with long hair and feathers in their hair, the women just threw themselves at their feet. And one of them actually said after his talks, do any of the sisters want to sleep with me tonight? No. So I said, I want to see how the Native American people really live. And I met this woman who had been to a powwow on the Pine Ridge Reservation the year before. And as soon as she said it, I knew that's where I needed to go. So a friend came with me. We went to meet another friend in Denver from Glastonbury. She moved to Denver. And she drove us up to the reservation, to this powwow. And I got connected with the medicine man that was doing the ceremonies at the powwow, and realized that where the spiritual energy is in the sun dances. The powwows are just their social dancing, but the sun dances are very, very powerful ceremony. So I ended up staying with him for 6 weeks, and that's how I found out how the native people really live. Because he had his oldest son, and his wife had 8 children. They lived in government housing. At the first of the month, when they got their paycheck, the parents would start drinking, and the little girl, the 8-year-old, would look after the other 7, including a set of twins and a 6-month-old baby. The next youngest daughter lived in a trailer on Eli's land with her boyfriend, and they were drunk all the time. And then his youngest daughter was living in this cottage that he had built by himself, just wood. He couldn't afford windows, so it had plastic on the windows. It had a sink, and I assumed it had a pipe draining out. But underneath the sink, there was this horrible smell. So I opened the door, and there's 3 inches of dirty water with a dead rat floating in it, because it just went, there was no pipe. So this was my exposure to how it really is. Well, one day this car pulls up, and this body kind of crawls out of the car, crawls up the path of it, and it's the middle daughter's boyfriend, cut to the arm. His arm was cut to the bone, and he was like bleeding. So Eli ran next door to a phone, and I sat with him, and his girlfriend walks up. And I said, could you go in the house and get a blanket, because he's going into shock. She walks up, kicks him, said, I hope you die, and walked off. And she'd probably done it. But the thing was that me and Eli both talked to him about, this is your opportunity to change your life, and he did. He cleaned up, got sober, they both stopped drinking, and that was a happy story. But one day Eli took me to another Sundance on the next reservation. He was going to come bring me back. Well, he never showed up. So the last day of the Sundance, there I am, 80 miles away with my backpack and my tent and my sleeping bag, but I'd left my passport and all my money with him, because I thought I would lose it at the camp. So I had to go around the camp saying, would somebody give me a ride to Pine Ridge? And this guy, this really nice guy, said yes, he would. And then he said, keep talking, keep in touch with me, because I want to know what happens to you. So I did. Anyway, I kept just traveling. We went to the south of France. We lived in a teepee. Jenny learnt how to cook, go out, get the wood, build a fire, put the porridge on the fire and cook the breakfast before I was even up. It was wonderful. But then when I came back to Glastonbury, I married this guy who was also not very nice, so I left him. And then I moved in, this friend took me in, and we used to channel every day. We used to sit and channel every day. It was wonderful. And one day King Arthur came, and he gave her the codes for the sword, the Pendragon, the Celtic sword, and he gave me the codes for the Grail. And he said, will you take them to America? So I said, okay, but how am I going to do that? So at the Sundance, I'd met a whole group of people from California, and one of them invited me to come visit, so that's what I did. I just left everything, came to America with 2 suitcases and $300, and here I am 30 years later with a little bit more money and quite a few more suitcases. But this is what I've learned, is that I live on what I call radical trust. That you don't know. I've been down to my last dollar. That I ended up marrying this guy who was a disaster because he had PTSD from Vietnam and he was very depressed. But I was glad that I was able to do that for him because he was just so sad. And we didn't have Vietnam in England, so I didn't realize the damage that it had been done. So I stayed with him for a year, but I just couldn't do it anymore. So he said, you have to leave then. So I just put all my stuff in the truck, headed for this camp in Santa Cruz, celebrating the birth of a white buffalo calf, which is part of the prophecy that when the return, the earth is going to be healed, the white buffalo will be born. So there was a camp. And I met this guy from Tahoe, so I ended up going back to stay with him for a bit, because I had nowhere to go. That didn't work out, so one of his friends took me in, and this is the way it went. I just kind of hopped around, but always something came up that I was able to be supportive. So I came back to Grass Valley and I did my CNA training because it was very difficult moving around without either some kind of money savings or some kind of work. Well, being a CNA, you can get a job tomorrow absolutely anywhere. So I trained as a CNA. I did a lot of work with hospice for about 20 years. I worked with hospice. So I was living in Grass Valley and I knew it was time to move, but I didn't know where. And I kept seeing these names, Durango Car, Durango Street. So it was like, I think I need to move to Durango. And one of my friends moved there, so she invited me and I got house sitting and all that kind of stuff. So I moved there and I loved Colorado. I got a job at Pagosa Hot Springs at the massage place, so I got to go in the hot springs for free. And I was doing women's groups at the time, and because I lived in Glastonbury, I called it priestess training. And I put up a notice on the community board in Pagosa Springs. Cowboy country was not a good idea. And I called it priestess training. And I went home one day and there was this message on my answer phone saying, we're going to come and get you, English woman. Get out of our country. We don't want you here. We're going to come and get you and make you swear on the Bible. And I go, oh. So I'd already been going to Santa Fe to do women's groups there. And I got on the phone to the girl that hosted. I said, oh, this horrible thing just happened. She said, I know. I've got a place for you. So I put my stuff in my car again, drove down to Santa Fe, and I absolutely loved Santa Fe. It was such a wonderful. But after 5 years of dry and cold and sand and wind blowing, it was too dry for me because I'm a water person. So me and my women friends, we got together on January 1st every year, and we did a vision board. And I just always wanted to go to Hawaii. That was my dream from being a little child. And I'd made on my vision board, I'd used a picture from Hawaii Air, and it said, follow me home to Hawaii. Well, I wasn't thinking of moving there. My friend said, do you realize you put home? Well, the next month, one of my friends from Grass Valley moved to the Big Island. She was very lonely. She invited me to come and stay, so I did. We went down to one of the bays where the dolphins come in. It's called Two Step. It was raining. It was Saturday afternoon. It was cold. It was grey. And this whole pod of dolphins just came right up to the wall where we were standing, and they said, get in the water. So I did. There was only me and 8 dolphins. And they said, we are your family from Sirius, and you need to move here. And I was crying. I couldn't stop crying. So I said, okay, I will, but I'll need a miracle again. So the next day we went to a shamanic drumming ceremony where somebody drums and then you all go on your own journeys. Well, the dolphins took me in a ship up to Sirius and showed me that we'd all come from Sirius, where the Christ flame is anchored. The Christ light is coming from Sirius. And that we all chose to come here to the earth to bring that Christ light. And some of us came as whales, dolphins, dogs, cats, cows, or people. So I was sharing this story after we'd had the drumming, and the only other person there, she said, well, I have a house here, and I leave every summer, so I need a house sitter. Ta-da! So that would be me. She was leaving on May 15th, and I trained as a doula because I knew there's another way to give birth to babies than what I experienced. So I had a lady who was giving birth on the 15th, so I couldn't come before. So I sold all my stuff, had a big yard sale, ended up moving to the Big Island on 6/6/6, which was a good day for me. And so I was every day, I was swimming with the dolphins, met all these amazing people. Everybody that I met was my family from Lemuria. And I didn't know anything about Lemuria. I knew I was one, but I knew nothing about it. But from doing hypnosis with all these people, I learned that was the first civilization where the Pacific is now. It was before separation, where we lived in unity, we lived in oneness, we lived love. So we have coded within us how to do this. So that's why I had to go back to Hawaii, was to remember all of those. So I went to the Big Island, and it was very hard to make a living there doing healing work. So one day I'm walking on the beach, and this woman walks up to me and said, I need to give you a reading. And I said, okay. And she said, why aren't you world famous? And I said, well, you're the psychic, you tell me. And she said it wasn't the right time, because this was 2006. She said I had to wait for December 21st, 2012, that was going to activate the divine feminine grid. And that's the grid that I work with, so that's why I had to wait for that. So let's see. Anyway, I love living on Hawaii. And I never thought of moving. And then all of a sudden in my head, I kept saying to myself, if I had to leave Maui, I don't know where I would go. And I subconsciously knew that it was time to leave. And I didn't know where. Now, my great joy of living on the islands was paddleboarding or going out in the Zodiac with the whales and the dolphins. Well, the last winter I was there, they wouldn't talk to me. They wouldn't swim with me. Every time I got in the water, they would take off and go away. And what it was, they knew I had to leave. And they were making it easy for me, because the thing that was keeping me there was them, was the whales and the dolphins. The last swim I had with a whale, she swam from about a mile away. This huge humpback swam about a mile away. She just kept coming and coming and coming. Well, normally they'll get about 20 feet away and then they'll dive under you. Well, she didn't. She just kept coming. And my friend that was in the boat, I asked him after how close she was, the whale, and he said about 6 feet. And he thought she was going to lift me up on her nose, and so did I. But she didn't. She tipped on her side, and she kind of put her fins around me, like she was trying to hug me. And then when she went by with her eye was this big, golden, and she looked into my soul. And she said, "It's time for you to leave the islands. You've received all the codes for living in oneness. Now it's time to take them where they're needed." Well, I had no idea where I would go. So I sent an email out to everybody that I knew saying, "Do you want me to come and put on a workshop where you live?" Well, I'd done a wedding for this lady from Cincinnati, Ohio. And she said, yes, because I ended up going to Cincinnati. She put on these workshops, and people were so grateful, because nobody goes to Cincinnati. No healers, no teachers. There's nothing. It's Trump country. It's right-wing religion. There are all these billboards as you drive from Cincinnati to Dayton. If you die tomorrow, where will you go? Next one. Hell is real. This is the vibe. This is the vibe. And these people were starving. So the message was, you take your chalice to the desert where people are hungry for the water. You don't take it to California. So anyway, after 3 years, it was getting to me. And some of my friends moved to Florida, so I wanted to go to the water. And one of my friends in Cincinnati, her sister, had a condo in Sarasota, Florida, which is absolutely beautiful. And she was living in somewhere, Colorado or Michigan, looking after their mother. So she let me rent her condo really cheap. Now, when she was going to be coming back and I had to leave, Mother Mary came and said, "You've got to buy a house." Well, I had not owned a house since the horrible divorce with husband number one, father of the twins, because I associated home ownership with slavery. And there was no way. And she kept saying, "You've got to buy a house." And I kept driving around, and there was this condo on a lake with a fountain outside the window and bald eagles and ospreys. And she kept saying, "It's here, it's here." So I got a loan. I was able to get a loan. And I bought this beautiful condo, and it was a little sign in the window saying for rent. And I knocked on the door and I said, "Oh, would you be open to buying it?" Well, it just happened that this guy, his mother, whose condo it was in a nursing home, and she wasn't doing very well. So I was able to sit and talk him through, because I'd worked with so many people who were dying, and help him to come to terms. So he said, "Of course you can buy my condo." And so they sold it to me a very, very, very good price. But after 5 hurricanes in one summer and 95 degrees humidity, 95% humidity and 95 degrees heat, Florida is not a place. I was going, "Get me out of here. I said, I need to go home now. I need to I can't do this jumping about anymore. I'm too old. I'm officially on Medicare, so that means that I don't have to keep doing this, all this jumping about. So the next month, my daughter got pregnant, and she lives in LA. And I'd always said, when you start having babies, I will be there. So I moved to LA, and we have three little baby girls. They're absolutely wonderful. But after 6 years in LA, I couldn't find my people there. I couldn't find my tribe there. And we came up here on a vacation to Avila Hot Springs, and that was it. So I moved up here. And I was looking for 2 years. I sold my mobile home in Oxford. Couldn't find anywhere because I wasn't looking in the right place. Well, a friend took me on the Elfin Trail in Los Osos, and I watched a bald eagle for half an hour, and I said, I want to live right here. So I'd already seen the condo that I'm in now, the mobile home, but it was out of my range. Well, I saw the eagle on Tuesday. On Wednesday, that mobile home dropped $30,000 in one day in price. So I got on the phone to my realtor. I said, I want to see that place today. So we went and saw it. We put in the offer on Thursday. It was accepted on Friday. And that was it. That was my home. So what I want to tell you, don't sweat the small stuff. Always go for the big picture, because there is a plan. Everything that happens to you is part of the plan. The trick is figuring it out. What's this teaching me? A lot of it is karma. I've had horrendous relationships in this lifetime, but it's all been cleaning up the things that were not resolved from past lives, mostly. Where I've sat with so many people who are dying, and I hold their hands and I sing to them. And the two big regrets, not doing their dream, not living their dream while they were still young enough to do it. And any kind of animosity with family, like I didn't speak to my son for 20 years, and now we've run out of time. So clean up your stuff now. Don't wait 1 minute to make amends, grovel, apologize, even if you don't think you've done anything. Don't have that distance between people, because the stuff is not what you take with you. The bank account, the savings, the pensions, all that 401k, that's not what you take with you. The only thing that you take with you is the love that you have shared. And the only thing that you leave behind is your name written in the hearts of all of those that you have loved, which includes cats and dogs, by the way. So, thank you. That's my message.